My parents forced me to pay rent for years. Spoiled sister's luxury life. Have you ever felt like the ATM in your family? The one everyone calls when their wallets are empty, but conveniently forgets when it's time for, actual family connection? That was me, Owen, for longer than I care to admit. And the worst part? I didn't even realize how deeply I was being used until a phone call, a butt dial, of all things, ripped the blinders off and showed me my family for what they truly were, a pack of wolves in designer clothing. It all started innocently enough. Fresh out of college, drowning in student loan debt, I landed a decent job in software development. My parents, bless their hearts, offered me a room in their sprawling suburban home in Austin, Texas, a temporary solution, they said, until I got on my feet. The catch? I'd pay rent. Not market value, of course. Just a contribution to help with household expenses. It seemed fair. After all, they had raised me, clothed me, fed me. The usual parental duties that, apparently, came with a lifetime invoice. My younger sister, Scarlett, a perpetual aspiring influencer 2 years my junior, lived rent-free, of course. Her career, posting selfies and sponsored content on Instagram, didn't exactly generate a steady income. But she had potential, according to mom and dad. And potential, in our family, was apparently worth more than actual, tangible contributions. The first few years were tolerable. I worked long hours, paid my contribution on time, and tried to ignore the growing disparity between my life and Scarlett's. While I was pinching pennies and eating ramen, she was jetting off on weekend trips to Miami, sporting the latest designer handbags, and dining at restaurants I could only dream of affording. It's for her brand, Owen, mom would explain, her voice laced with a subtle hint of condescension. She needs to maintain a certain image. Right, because my image as a sleep-deprived, debt-ridden software developer was clearly thriving. The contribution started to creep up. First, it was a little extra to cover the rising cost of utilities. Then, it was a temporary loan to help dad with a minor business setback. Then, it was a contribution to mom's wellness retreats, read, luxury spa weekends. Each request was accompanied by a carefully orchestrated performance of guilt and obligation. We're family, Owen, they'd say. We need to support each other. And like a fool, I believed them. I wanted to believe them. I craved that feeling of belonging, of being a valued member of the family. So I kept paying, kept working, kept sacrificing, all while Scarlett continued her lavish lifestyle, courtesy of the Bank of Owen. The turning point, as I mentioned, was a butt dial. It was a Friday night, around midnight. I'd just finished a grueling week of debugging a particularly nasty piece of code, and I was sprawled on my bed, scrolling through mindless memes, trying to de-stress. My phone buzzed. Scarlett's name flashed on the screen. Odd. She rarely called me, unless she needed something. And midnight calls were usually reserved for emergencies. Hello? I answered, my voice thick with sleep. Silence. Then, the muffled sounds of a party, laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. My stomach sank. Another family gathering I wasn't invited to. Classic. I was about to hang up when I heard my name. Can you believe Owen still falls for it? That was my mother's voice, sharp and mocking. He's such a pushover, Scarlett chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. Honestly, it's pathetic. My blood ran cold. Well, he's useful, Dad added, his tone smug. He pays the bills. What else is he going to do with his money? He should be paying more, Mom interjected. He got that promotion, didn't he? He can afford it. We deserve a little luxury, after all we've done for him. Deserve? My grip on the phone tightened. After all they'd done for me? Scarlett giggled. He's so predictable. He thinks if he just keeps paying, we'll magically start appreciating him. Like, thanks for the rent, Owen, but that doesn't mean we have to like you. That was the moment. The moment the carefully constructed facade of my family crumbled before my eyes. It wasn't about support, or love, or even obligation. It was about exploitation. Pure, unadulterated exploitation. I listened, frozen, as they continued to dissect me, to mock my generosity, to plot how to extract even more money from me. They talked about my boring life, my lack of a social life, my unfashionable clothes. They laughed at my attempts to set boundaries, to suggest that maybe, just maybe, Scarlett could contribute financially. He actually tried to say no that one time, Mom cackled. Remember? He said he was saving up for a down payment on a house. Pathetic. One guilt trip, and he was back on his knees, begging to help, Scarlett added, her voice dripping with satisfaction. They thought I was weak. Predictable. A doormat. They had no idea that this accidental eavesdropping had awakened a sleeping dragon. I didn't hang up. I didn't yell. I didn't even breathe. I just listened, my mind racing, a plan slowly taking shape. They wanted predictable? I'd give them predictable. They wanted a doormat? I'd be the best damn doormat they'd ever seen. Until I wasn't. The call eventually ended, probably because Scarlett's phone ran out of battery. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, my heart pounding in my chest. They hadn't realized I was on the line. They had no idea that their carefully crafted game was about to come crashing down. But I did. And I was ready. I didn't confront them immediately. No, that would be too easy. Too predictable. I needed to play their game, to lull them into a false sense of security. The next day, I sent a text to our family group chat. Hey, sorry, my phone died last night. Everything okay? Scarlett responded instantly, OMG, total phone fail. LOL. We were just talking about dinner plans. Nothing important, winking face. Liar. Mom chimed in, we were wondering if you'd be free for dinner this weekend, sweetie. We have something important to discuss. Ah, there it was. The setup. The next request for more money. I could practically smell the desperation through the screen. Sure, I replied. Sounds good. See you Saturday? I spent the rest of the week going through the motions, pretending nothing had changed. I answered their texts, smiled at their fake concern, and even sent a few thinking of you emojis. I was the perfect, oblivious son, the ever-reliable ATM. Inside, though, I was seething. Every interaction, every text, every forced smile fueled my resolve. I was building my case, gathering my evidence, preparing for the moment of reckoning. Saturday arrived, and I drove to their house, my stomach churning with a mixture of anticipation and disgust. The house, a sprawling, two-story McMansion in a gated community, was a constant reminder of their extravagant lifestyle, a lifestyle I was subsidizing. I walked in, unannounced, as usual. Mom, Dad, and Scarlett were gathered in the living room, a scene carefully staged for maximum emotional impact. Mom was perched on the edge of the sofa, clutching a tissue, her eyes red-rimmed, probably from onion juice, knowing her. Dad was pacing back and forth, his brow furrowed in a show of concern. Scarlett was lounging on a chaise lounge, scrolling through her phone, her expression carefully neutral. Owen, darling, Mom said, her voice trembling. We're so glad you're here. We have a bit of a situation, Dad added, his voice grave. It's the rent, Scarlett blurted out, finally looking up from her phone. The landlord raised it again. It's astronomical. Here we go. I feigned surprise. Really? By how much? Mom dabbed at her eyes with the tissue. Another $500 a month, sweetie. We don't know how we're going to manage. We've cut back on everything we can, Dad said, his voice tight. But it's still not enough. Scarlett sighed dramatically. I even had to cancel my trip to Bali. It's devastating. Right. Devastating. Like having to choose between paying rent and buying a new designer handbag. I let the silence hang in the air, letting them squirm. I could see the desperation in their eyes, the thinly veiled panic. They were expecting me to cave, to offer to cover the increase, to save them from their self-inflicted financial woes. So, Mom said, her voice barely a whisper. We were hoping. Maybe. You could help us out? Just until we get back on our feet, Dad added quickly. We'd be forever grateful, Scarlett chimed in, her voice dripping with insincerity. I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Of course, I said, my voice calm and even. I'll help. The relief that washed over their faces was palpable. They had done it. They had manipulated me again. They had won. Or so they thought. I'll pay the rent, I continued, my smile widening. But not this month's. Their expressions shifted from relief to confusion. What? What do you mean? Mom stammered. I mean, I said, my voice dropping to a low, steady tone, that I heard the phone call. The butt dial. I heard everything. I heard you mocking me, plotting against me, treating me like nothing more than a walking, talking ATM. The color drained from their faces. They looked like deer caught in headlights, frozen in place, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. I heard you, Mom, I said, my voice laced with a cold fury I hadn't known I possessed. I heard you say I was useful. That I owed you. That I should be paying more. I heard you, Scarlett, I continued, turning to my sister. I heard you call me pathetic. A pushover. That I was only good for paying your bills. And you, Dad, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I heard you say I had nothing else to do with my money. That I should be grateful to be exploited by my own family. They were speechless. They had no defense. No excuses. No carefully crafted lies to fall back on. They were exposed. I'm done, I said, my voice firm and resolute. I'm done being your ATM. I'm done being your doormat. I'm done being the useful idiot who pays for your extravagant lifestyle. I stood up, my body trembling with a mixture of rage and relief. You have until the end of the month to figure out how to pay the rent, I said, my voice cold and detached. And after that, you're on your own. I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I would see, a family shattered, their carefully crafted world collapsing around them. The next few weeks were interesting. My phone exploded with calls and texts, ranging from frantic pleas to furious accusations. Mom tried the guilt trip, Dad tried the anger route, and Scarlett tried the manipulative or family card. I ignored them all. I blocked their numbers, deleted their emails, and unfollowed them on social media. I cut them out of my life, completely and utterly. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of guilt, moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But then I'd remember the phone call, the mocking laughter, the blatant exploitation, and my resolve would harden. I learned that they were evicted from their house. They had to downsize to a small apartment, a far cry from their luxurious suburban home. Scarlett had to get a real job, working as a waitress at a local diner. Mom and Dad had to dip into their retirement savings to make ends meet. They had to face the consequences of their actions, the consequences of living beyond their means, the consequences of treating their own son like a walking, talking ATM. I, on the other hand, thrived. I used the money I was no longer wasting on their extravagant lifestyle to pay off my student loans, invest in my future, and finally start living my life. I traveled, I bought a small condo, and I even started dating again. I found freedom. Freedom from their manipulation, freedom from their expectations, freedom from the constant drain on my finances and my emotions. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy. But it was necessary. Sometimes, the only way to break free from a toxic family is to cut the cord, to walk away, to refuse to be used any longer. And that's exactly what I did. I walked away, and I never looked back. Update 1. It's been a year since I cut ties with my family. I've had zero contact with them, and honestly, it's been the most peaceful year of my life. I've focused on my career, my relationships, and my own well-being. I've learned to prioritize my own needs, to set boundaries, and to say no without feeling guilty. I've also learned that forgiveness is a process, not a destination. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully forgive my family for what they did, but I'm no longer consumed by anger and resentment. I've accepted that they are who they are, and I've chosen to move on with my life. I've heard through the grapevine, a mutual acquaintance who still has some contact with Scarlett, that they're still struggling. They haven't learned their lesson. They still blame me for their problems, still believe they're entitled to my financial support. It's sad, but it's not my problem. I've done what I needed to do to protect myself, to break free from their toxic cycle. And I'm finally happy. Update 2. 2 years. 2 years of silence. 2 years of peace. 2 years of living my life on my own terms. Then, out of the blue, I received a text message. From Scarlett. Hey, Owen. Long time no talk. Can we meet? My initial reaction was to ignore it. To block her number and pretend it never happened. But something, curiosity, maybe, or a lingering sense of familial obligation, made me hesitate. I agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a coffee shop near my apartment. I arrived early, my heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and something else. Something I couldn't quite name. She was already there, sitting at a table in the corner, looking different. Gone was the perfectly coiffed hair, the designer clothes, the air of entitlement. She looked ordinary, tired, defeated. We exchanged awkward greetings, and then there was silence. A long, uncomfortable silence that stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Finally, she spoke.
I wanted to apologize, she said, her voice barely a whisper.
For everything. I stared at her, surprised. This wasn't the Scarlett I remembered. The Scarlett I remembered was arrogant, self-centered, and incapable of admitting fault. We were wrong, she continued, her eyes welling up with tears. We treated you terribly. We used you, manipulated you, took advantage of your generosity. And we're so sorry. She went on to explain how their lives had unraveled after I cut them off, how they'd lost everything, how they'd had to start over, how they'd finally realized the error of their ways. It took losing everything to realize how much we'd taken you for granted, she said, her voice choked with emotion. We were so focused on ourselves, on our own wants and needs, that we never stopped to think about how our actions were affecting you. She talked about how mom and dad had finally gotten jobs, how they were working hard to pay off their debts, how they were trying to be better people. We're not asking for your money, she said, her voice firm. We want to apologize. And we want to know if there's any chance at all, that you can forgive us. I listened, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, sadness, and something else. Something that felt a lot like hope. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I needed time to process, to think, to decide if I could ever truly forgive them.
I appreciate the apology, I said, my voice hesitant.
But I need time. I need to think about this. She nodded, understanding. We understand, she said. We hope you'll consider it. We miss you, Owen. We miss our family. We talked for a while longer, catching up on each other's lives, avoiding the elephant in the room, the years of hurt and betrayal. It was awkward. But it was also healing. I left the coffee shop with a lot to think about. I didn't know what the future held, whether I could ever fully reconcile with my family. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. A glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, forgiveness was possible. And that maybe, just maybe, family could be something more than just a source of financial support. Maybe it could be a source of love, support, and genuine connection. The journey is far from over. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally on the right path.